The Hoovers are one of the most notorious gangs in LA. I covered them in my first 2 episodes. Check those out if you haven't. They have 8 different Hoover sets. That includes 5 deuce, 5-9, 7-4, 8 tray, 9 deuce, 9-4, 107, and 11 deuce Hoover. The Hoovers are a set that claims neither blood or Crip, once being Crips, but dropping out identity to take on a new name, the Hoover Criminals, a few decades back. Only one Hoover set remains Crip, and that's 5 deuce Hoover. But another one of the Hoover's enemies will be the 6'5 Menlos. The Menlos wear the Milwaukee Brewer gear to represent the M in Menlo. They also wear blue and yellow as their colors. The Menlos have been beefing with the Hoovers for decades, especially the 7-4 and the 8-tray Hoovers. But they wasn't always rivals. The beef started in the 80s and only intensified after that. After fallouts with the Hoovers, they would later be in the gangster car. But an incident and a fallout with the 8-tray gangsters, they would leave that car and later become neighborhood Crips. The Menlos are on good terms with the neighborhood Crips, especially hoods like 6'7". They beef with hoods around them like the Brams and the Hoovers heavy. This rivalry goes back 4 decades, but I will cover almost 2 decades back, leading up to 2011. October 21st, 2003, a 6'5 Menlo member would be shot. It was believed to be by the Hoovers. An hour later, a woman named Vanetta will be driving in a car. In the car included her sons, her daughters, and her little cousins. They will stop at a light on 76 and Hoover. Vanetta's son will see a car pull up and notice it was Nene, a 6'5 Menlo member, who they all knew well. Nene had a good relationship with Vanetta's family. Vanetta would be confused why Nene was in the area because the Hoovers and the Menlo's rivalry. Nene's car would hit a U-turn. Then seconds later, shots would be shattering Vanetta's windows. One of Vanetta's daughters would be hit. Vanetta would see a patrol car a few blocks away and seek help. Moments later, Nene would call her phone and apologize. He would say he mistook their car for an 8-tray Hoover member's car. He apologized and told her to change the color of her car for her safety. Nene will also accidentally leave a message on Vanetta's phone, where he'll be talking to another 6'5 Menlo member. He would admit to the shooting, even where it took place. Vanetta and her niece will pick Nene out of a photo lineup police showed them at the hospital. Nene would call Vanetta days later, and he would try to convince her to say it wasn't him, and to recant the statements her and her family made. Vanetta would record this convo. Nene would even tell Vanetta he repainted his car. Nene would be picked up a while later, and all the recorded calls will be used in his trial. Nene has been in prison since 2007 and is eligible for parole in 2029. December 18, 2006, around 10 a.m., a man named Jermaine will be talking to some friends outside of an apartment complex, including his friend Deontay. After a few minutes, a man would appear and would begin shooting. Deontay would be hit and he would lose his life. Jermaine would describe the shooter, but failed to identify him in the photo lineup. The apartment complex has surveillance cameras, and the car used in the shooting will be seen driving up and leaving 80th and Vermont, Hoover returned shortly after. December 26, a woman named Patricia will be arrested on unrelated crimes. The police will ask her if she had any knowledge of crimes, and they would shorten her sentence. She would say a man named Troy was the shooter, and another man named Anthony was the driver in the December 18 shooting. December 27, officers will spot the car that was on camera in the incident in Menlo's turf. One of the men in the car was Anthony. He will be photographed and released. January 3rd, police will interview Patricia about her statements in December. She would say she knew about the shooting because Troy and Anthony were discussing the incident. They would say they went into 8-tray Hoover turf and put in some work. She even told officers Troy and Anthony asked her to drive by the scene to see the outcome. Police will see the car was registered to Anthony, and 2 days later, Anthony and Troy will be arrested. Patricia would testify against them both. She would have received 56 years for her previous crimes, but with her testimony, she received 16 years. Troy was sentenced to 50 years to life, and Anthony received 35 to life. A 7'4 Hoover named Kevin was believed to be a factor in 7'4 hood. His phone was being tapped, and he was being investigated for many things. June 17, 2008, he and other Hoover members will plot to air out the Menlo's hood. It would be calls throughout the whole day, saying who was going to get the cars and who was going to get the choppers for the shooting. The shooting didn't go as planned because everything they brought jammed on them, and the Menlo member would get away without being harmed. This was said all over the phone, and the police would intercept those calls. All who was involved would be arrested, and the police had everything they needed. Police will also find out about previous licks they committed, as well as shootings against different Lane members. In all, it was 66 phone calls intercepted. That was all the evidence police needed in trial. Kevin and Morgan both received life. This last case involves two separate incidents, but the 7-4 and the A-Tray Hoovers will be involved. December 14, 2011. Quanisha watched her boyfriend Miguel back his truck out their driveway of their home. Her Charger was speeding and almost hit Miguel's truck. Miguel was going to the corner store on 65th and Menlo. The store was a few houses away from his home. He was going there to pick up a friend who was a cashier at the time. Miguel was walking inside the store where he seen the Charger again. He would hear shooting and immediately ran inside the store. Miguel would come out to see a man he knew on the curb laid out. He would lose his life. A week later, a woman would be in a rolling 60s turf. She would be sitting in her car waiting for her friend to come out. She would see a Charger pull up and see a man jump out and begin shooting. She would get a good look at him and later identify him. The Charger would leave the scene and later run into the police who were blocks away. The people in the Charger would be throwing things during the chase. The Charger would later hit a stop sign and 3 men would be arrested. The 3 men were Travis, Marquise, and Brian. Travis was from 7-4 Hoover, and Marquise and Brian were from A-Tray. The Charger was registered to Travis, and he was identified by Quanisha and Miguel as being the person in the shooting in the Menlo's turf. Travis will be charged in 2 cases and received 75 years to life. Brian and Marquise were both charged in the second. Brian has been in prison since 2013 and is eligible for parole in 2027. Marquise is eligible for parole in 2023. This will conclude this episode. If you haven't already, make sure you check out my previous videos. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.